You're listening to Tonebender's Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas. This is the show where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. Sound Ideas works with partners across the creative industries to distribute professional sound libraries, and they're always looking to grow their collection. If you've created your own sound effects library or are currently developing one, Sound Ideas is interested in acquiring high-quality collections from creators, whether it's a focus collection or a wide-ranging release. They offer a trusted platform with global distribution, professional licensing, metadata support, and a team that understands the craft. If you have a sound effects library and are interested in selling it, Sound Ideas would like to hear from you. To get more information, please reach out via email to support@sound-ideas.com. Hello and welcome to this talk with an amazing group of people making up our Sound, Immersion, and Television panel. My name is Tim Muirhead. I'm a sound editor, mostly in animated series like Paw Patrol and Rubble and Crew, as well as the host of the Tonebender Sound Design Podcast. I'll be leading the discussion today with our impressive group of guests spanning a wide spectrum of genres within modern television. I'm so excited to speak with these creatives about the projects that they have used sound to act as a unique tool to immerse the audience into the worlds of these projects. So let's join me in welcoming them to this stage here. First up, we have Vinny Alfano, who's recently worked on the high-end series Dexter Resurrection and Emily in Paris as the re-recording mixer. It's great to talk to you, Vinny. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Also joining us is Christina Wen, re-recording mixer on Love Story, the massive hit series on Disney+, covering the lives of JFK Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. It's lovely to have you aboard, Christina.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Next, we have a double dose of the sound team from Spider Noir, supervising sound editors Ethan Beagle and Annie Sissel. I'm excited to talk to you both about the unique sound world you've created for this Amazon Prime series. Welcome. It's great to meet you. Finally, we have R. Hollis Smith joining the party. Hollis was supervising sound editor, re-recording mixer, and music mixer on the hyper-personal documentary Noah Kahan Out of Body. From intimate emotional crisis to massive stadiums full of adoring fans, Out of Body presents a vast array of audio challenges. It's great to meet you, Hollis. Thanks for joining us today.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
So before we dive into kind of each of your respective projects that you've worked on as supervising sound editor or re-recording mixer, even sometimes serving both roles simultaneously, for the audience listening at home, could you kind of describe the responsibilities that speak to you personally between supervising sound editor, re-recording mixer, and if you have a favorite aspect of audio post between editing and mixing? Maybe Christina, do you want to take that first?
Sure. Putting me on the spot. I'm very lucky that I've worked in both editorial and mixing department. I think that I find both departments of job to be incredibly fun and challenging in different ways. And I won't go into the nitty gritty. I'm sure your listeners already know the different tasks of somebody who is working editorial department versus mixing department. For me, I think there's a very big different mindset. When I'm working in editorial, I'm always thinking about what I'm going to do so that I can put forward the best material for the mix team to then elevate it and to mix them into the story however they see fit and this filmmaker see fit. So I think that part of mindset is really different. Whereas when I'm mixing, I'm taking somebody's editorial work when I know that they've also put in their hard work and give it everything they've got. And that material is delivered to me. So now I am taking their material thinking that I will now need to really make sure I do its justice and make sure all elements will shine through and support the storytelling in the best it possibly will. So I think for me, it's just being in both departments, I have to switch my mindset that way. And because I've worked in both departments, I think also it helps me, having been in the mix chair, it helps me that when I'm preparing editorial, I sort of, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about, the mixer will probably want to have certain things laid out differently or have different perspective, prepare this and that way. So that really helps a little bit, having been working in both departments. Both are incredibly fun and challenging for me personally.
Hollis, on Noah Kahan Out of Body, I believe you were both supervising sound editor and re-recording mixer. Do you want to talk about preparing tracks for your own faders?
For most of the projects that I do, because I'm mostly working documentary stuff, like nonfiction, more than narrative stuff. So I'm usually pre-mixing as I'm editing. So a lot of the times, kind of one and the same. I don't really know how to disconnect the two. Each one of them has a different challenge. With Noah Khan, there was a lot of different environments, whether it be a stage, and then you're trying to dig his tiny little voice that's so far away from the mic with people screaming, or the intimate moments, which there's a lot of that because the theme of the show is the same. If you've listened to any of his music, it's his heart in the music. So to go in and clean up and try and create the environments that reflect where he is mentally or what we're trying to convey, and that it gets pretty tough, but that was the fun of the deal, was really trying to clean it up and recreate the environments that it was in. There's a lot of nature that we had to remove because there's a lot of outdoor stuff. I know it's supposed to be my favorite parts of it, but the whole thing is just one cohesive ball at that point, and then the music gets added in later. So it's kind of hard to talk about one particular aspect of that because he had to approach it from multiple angles at the same time.
From Spider Noir, you two shared supervising sound editor roles while other people were mixing. Do you want to talk about how you two work together to get the sessions prepped for the mix stage?
Andy and I we divide labor between dialogue and effects. So I would handle dialogue, ADR, loop group. Andy would handle sound design, effects, and Foley. During the editorial phase, we're in constant communication about what it is we're trying to do, what are the different layers that we're trying to get. And on a show like this, where it's got a lot of comedic elements, where you're going to be trying a bunch of different things as you go and constantly searching for the best version of the joke, we're always preparing multiple options of things that we have sort of readily available. And then when we're on the stage, it's kind of, I don't know, Andy, how would you describe it? I don't think the line isn't as delineated between effects and dialogue once you're in the mix and everybody is putting it together to try and figure out what the best version of the show is going to be.
To that point, once we do get to the stage, it's trying to bring the vision of the showrunners and producers to its, final finish line crossing. And the entire team has worked tirelessly, but also very creatively in a energetic way. In this show in particular, crafting the sound design and the elements of the show, we were tasked with having it be a show that was built like it was a movie made in the 1930s, but then also having it, talk to audiences of today with the Atmos and superhero elements that we kind of come to expect. So it was really fun working with the mix team, first curating the sounds, going through libraries, having old recordings that were recorded with Mag, trying to incorporate them where it's not like cheesy or doesn't work, and telling that story like this is an old noir film, and then bringing it to life, like let's say with the spider sense, and having the whole world open up because now he's hearing everything clearly. We really had a lot of fun with that, and the mix team, takes our tracks that we've kind of, like Hollis was mentioning, I do a lot of my work pre-mix. So when I'm cutting, I'm designing and pre-mixing it because I need to kind of know how is this going to translate when we get to the stage and get it into the hands of a mixer. If I'm not mixing it, I want to make sure that it's as tight and ready as possible for those that are. And then, like Ethan was saying, it's that full collaboration at the end together where, if a line of dialogue is bumping me, I'm going to flag it to somebody and say, wait, is anybody else getting bumped by this? And how can we help tell the story here? And same with sound effects. If these sound effects are great, doesn't matter if they're getting in the way of the story. So we have to work together and collaborate together. So it's really a great experience from start to finish, in my opinion.
Vinny, do you want to talk about the kind of contrasting between the two series that you've worked on recently, how you approach the two of them when you're getting ready to mix these two shows that are so drastically different?
In terms of the sound editorial process, part of the fun is being able to sit down with the team here at Parabolic and, we kind of go through, the scenes and the rough cuts and the episodes, and we'll say, hey, maybe we'll cover this scene more so with group than with sound effects or vice versa. And then, part of the sound editorial process will be going through with the ADR supervisor or the dialogue editor and saying, hey, can we save this production? Should we flag this? and also working not only with our sound editorial team, but also with the picture editorial team and seeing, hey, what do they want? What is something that they really want to, convey sonically, whether it's, a big parade scene in Emily or, a murder scene in Dexter. So it's just kind of fun getting everyone in the room together to kind of bounce ideas around and figure out what's going to be the best plan of attack. And then in terms of mixing, it's part of it is doing justice to the story and doing justice to the scene and whatever might be happening in those moments. So, in Emily, in Paris, there's all these kind of like lovey-dovey romantic scenes, that where there's like a lot of cheer going on, and we kind of want the, maybe the ambiences to have more of like a higher energy or, more of a lighter sound. And then in Dexter, we could have these darker moments where kind of maybe will filter out some of the higher frequencies so that it's more of just like low tones. And so we're basically during the mix we'll try to match the mix to whatever the content of the scene is in the direction of the scene. And I think that's kind of always been our plan of attack and kind of what we do to make sure that the TV show sounds good and it works for the audience and for the producers and directors and everyone involved.
Were you ever working on both series simultaneously?
Yes, lots of back and forth between, the happy birds and then the dark droney sound. So,
Ethan, your credits include The Burbs, Goosebumps, You, and now Spider Noir. You're working on darker stories that also have very clear comedic elements. How do you make sure that the audiences kind of get both halves of that equation? What decisions you make from a sound perspective to pair these kind of sounds to go get both the laughs and the scares?
Yeah, in some ways you don't have to, because this is an odd thing to say, but I think horror / darker elements in comedy, they're sort of born out of the same process. There's a setup of expectation and then there's surprise. And whether the surprise is a punchline or a scare, you're still driving towards you're driving on a similar road. So what it is ultimately what the sound selection that you're selecting is. And I think in these darker moments, you're trying to find things that are a little bit moodier, more atmospheric, and you're focusing more on the setup to accentuate the scare. Now, Spider Noir doesn't have like jump scares the way Goosebumps did or the way You did, things like that. So you don't really have that punch, but you do have the atmospheric. So whenever we're in a darker scene, for example, there's a scene where two of our villains are sitting in a car and it's raining, and you very carefully select that atmosphere of the rain hitting the cloth top of the car that they're in and sort of let that sit there. But you also need to just sort of stay out of the way and let the acting and the music kind of do their thing. And then with the comedy elements, it's trying to find the exact right sound that gets the right laugh that you want. When it's not too big, not too small, something like that. And that's why I said earlier, we end up having a pile of versions, because you might put a sound in. There's a sequence where we see a breakfast cart rolling and it goes past two of Silvermane's goons in the show. And one of them is asleep and snoring, and the other one is throwing things at him like peanuts or something. And trying to figure out like what's the right snore and what's the right sound of a peanut. Do we want it hitting him? Do we want it hitting like like a metal urn on like next to him? Where are we going to find that right thing? And you do it, and then you laugh, and then you go back and you say, what would we do if we did this other thing? Would I laugh differently? And then you do a different sound. You laugh differently. It's like, do I like that laugh better than the other laugh? And you're just kind of playing around with this. It's all an experiment until you find that you react the way that you feel is most appropriate in the context of the show.
Andy, you've worked on multiple superhero projects before, the Spider-Verse films. How did that inform you going into this very different world of the Spider-Verse?
It was, I'm very fortunate to have been a part of Spider-Verse 1 and 2. And early on the first Spider-Verse, I was tasked with creating all the different spiders, web shooters, and kind of their themes, because they're all from different universes. And so it was really kind of one of those moments in your career where you're like, all right, like Ethan was just saying, like, how do I make this one funnier? Because he's from Hanna-Barbera world. And, you just find yourself kind of falling into your library and just really diving in deeper and deeper and seeing where you can find these elements. But then there's this thing called a deadline that you have to meet, and it's within a certain amount of time that you really have to get there. So you kind of take the experience you've had through your career, but you also go, what feels right? And with Noir, um, since I'd already kind of created his character in Spider-Verse, it's different in live action, kind of like the Tom Holland, John Watts films that I worked on. When it's live action, you have to ground it more. You have to approach it in a sense that what feels real here. In animations, what feels real, as you might know, Tim, with the work you do, like you can get away with more kind of tones approaching the feeling of how the audience should feel. Going up kind of makes you feel a little happier, and going down can kind of give you that ominous, sad, different emotions through sound that we can do. So in the animation, I approached him in a way where Phil Lord had mentioned wanting to have him have a lot of old winds and kind of an old timey noir feel. And the winds weren't necessarily visible in the live action here. So we had to kind of hone those in with our whooshes and the way that he kind of would approach in his jacket and letting that move through the wind, moving that. The web shooter itself is now organic coming out of his skin, but he's older and hasn't used it in a while. So it definitely kind of added a nice, how do we reapproach this web shooting element that's been done before, but needs to be totally different? And the team did a great job, all coming up with different ideas. And we landed on, recording one day, taking an old 2,000-foot mag film and just poking out the core and recording the that comes out of that. It kind of helps give that story of the web shooting happening at a distance, but also you are using film to create a web shooter sound. And so you're just really, how many layers deep can we take this noir element and keep it subconscious for the audience not even knowing? So that is great. And like Ethan was saying, where you have to find the punching of it's not jump scares, but in working on these bigger, summer blockbusters, so to speak, you learn a kind of language of how the mix goes, where there's cuts that need to hit and what's going to hit that cut. And in episode 8, we have Silvermane coming down in an elevator after a massive fight's going on outside between all the supers. And it's just that sound of the screechy elevator and impact of it kind of old rickety, hitting the ground cuts us to then near silence as we get into this very scary kind of ominous moment after all this loud music and action that's really well mixed together. So having that experience, it was great to kind of approach this project with Ethan and the team. And Oren had such a great vision of just, like I said earlier, wanting to have it be this noir film from the 30s, but also having it be a superhero film of today kind of idea for the series. So I think we really did a great job of threading that needle and working with everyone. You learn something new every day. You're like, I tried that idea, but I didn't try it that way. And so that's a big part of kind of the experience I've had to this point here, is always keeping an open ear, pun intended, for, people and their opinions and their ideas, and also sounds. Doing the dishes, you might get that squeak that you needed. And you go, I got to record that. That's the squeak that's going to make us laugh. So a lot of fun.
You really thread the needle. Well, you use that phrase, thread the needle, because the Spider Noir feels like a superhero project, but it also feels like something different, which I imagine took a while to get that tone down, but you nailed it in the end. So congratulations to both of you on that.
How many times did you mix episode 1, Andy? Was it 4?
At least, and when he says
4 passes on episode 1.
And that means reboots each time too. Let's go at it with another approach. And so it wasn't just a replay it again. It was, let's see what like you saying, that we laughed, but can we laugh differently? Or, ooh, that was really, great there. I mean, at the end of 104, there's a moment where we have all this sound going where the hero has to save somebody in distress and reveal himself. And in the end, it came down to, no, this is where we need Chris and Michael's score just to take the audience in. It's very beautiful imagery, acting, everything is great. And we just took all the effects, all the efforts, everything out at that moment, just let a couple strings and the music carry us through. And that's really great when you have teams and clients and studios that are, working with you to put the best thing out there that you can.
Hollis, Out of Body presents like a really candid look at the life and kind of rise to fame of Noah Kahan. You also began your journey in sound through music, working at legendary Electric Lady Studios. I feel like we could talk about that for the next 7 hours if we wanted to. I'm curious if you can talk about how sound and music kind of work together in your brain. Yeah, no kidding, eh? And how those two processes came together to land you on this film.
I've been lucky enough to work on a lot of music-based documentary stuff over the last year, because prior to that, it was mostly serial killer stuff or abduction. It was really dark stuff. So it has been nice to have a bit of a lighter subject matter. But in this case, it depends on the project. For Noah Kahan specifically, the film was really there to tell the story of the music. He'd already written all this music talking about his life. So that film is really kind of documenting what's happening to him while he's becoming famous for already telling his life story. So you're hearing the music, he's going deeper, and you're seeing and hearing all the people that the music was about. So in this case, it was a bit more literal because the music wasn't used to portray like an emotional element. I mean, more than it already did, like more than the intention that Noah had when he wrote the song. We had score in between there that carried you from moment to moment, but the big moments, the music he'd already written carried the emotional weight. But in other projects, music it takes the place of some sound design, or it's enhanced by sound design. I mean, it is the original sound design. If you go back to the silent films, they were doing all of that heavy lifting, and I don't want to say manipulating. I mean, it is emotionally manipulating at its core, but there are nicer ways to say it that sound less duplicitous. But you're forcing people to feel something, to whatever you want them to feel with the music. I'm sure all the people listening and everybody on this panel and on this, they all know, you can put a foreboding, pulsating sound and scare the crap out of somebody, or suddenly hit them with a shrill, like psycho stabbing sound, or make somebody feel happy when you're not necessarily knowing that you're supposed to feel happy. It can be a crutch for the filmmakers in more cases than not. I mean, it is the emotional bed. So sometimes you have to have it more than the sound effects to convey what's going on, because the sound effects can make you know the environment or what possibly is coming, but you don't know how scared or happy or, what anxiety level someone's supposed to have without that musical element there. So I love them all equally, so I can't prioritize what's more important, because sound design was the reason why I pivoted. My time at Electric Lady was a tough time, so most of my stories are more about survival than they are about working on cool music projects. What made me pivot was wanting to just be a sound designer and do the effects. So I had to come back around to loving music as part of the filmmaking aspect, from shunning it, just like, oh, well, screw this, I'm just going to make a sound effects. It's absolutely important. And I know that they've made films that they worked really hard to not have music, like classic stuff, No Country for Old Men or or Rope or whatever. But I'm betting, and this is before digital, so they were cutting pieces of tape sound effects and doing all their field recordings and all that stuff. God, can you imagine how hard that must have been to get it right? Like what the director's like, nah, that's not the right tire squeal, or that's not the right field sound, or the boat in the water is not, it's just not creepy enough or rickety. Oh my God, man. Like if I wasn't gray already and I worked on that, I'd be gray by the end of it. I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Hearing the crickets too happy is one of my favorite things. That crickets is too happy in the background there. All right. All right.
That crickets and birds. Those are, yeah, those, man.
Hollis, I had a really great experience with watching your documentary because I have he just turned 13 a few days ago, son. So we watched this documentary together, and he's not used to like super emotional music. He's used to like pop music because that's what 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds listen to, but he's starting to get super emotional himself now that he's a teenager, So we're watching this documentary and it just kind of opened up his eyes. And like 45 minutes later, out of his room, I hear Noah Kahan's music just playing that he's got going on his iPad. So, I got to get him a better stereo system now, so he's not listening on his iPad. But it was really great to kind of watch him kind of like clue into this world of music and like how emotional music can be. And that was all through your documentary and the work you did on it. That's very cool.
I'll say Noah Kahan's a good place to start if you want music with depth and like that somebody's actually telling what's on. Yeah, they're not. It's not a team of songwriters. It's not. I'm not going to call out any of the big people, but it's him. I mean, he has his Nashville people. He has his people that are his contributors, but it's his music, and he's the one writing it. It's not BS that it's him and 24 people, because it doesn't take 24 people to write a damn song. But I think that's why it hits so hard. Like in a good way, it tugs at the heartstrings, or you're like, man, this guy was having a hard time when he was writing this, or but yeah, I'm really proud of how that one came out, and the fact that they let me mix the music for it, not the studio recordings, but I got to do all the concert stuff. And what was weird, you don't normally get support from music from labels like that. They don't give you elements, and we got stems from songs that were not released yet, so we got to use pieces of stuff that were going to be out on the album that came out after the film. So it was cool. I was really happy to work on that film, man.
That's awesome.
As I say, it worked great. A quick heads up to listeners in the Toronto area. I've teamed up with the Motion Picture Sound Editors and the Vaughan Film Festival to have a free screening to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the classic sci-fi film Independence Day. After the free screening, I will be doing an in-person interview with 3 key members of the film's sound team. In-house will be Val Koklowski, Andy Malcolm, and Mark Lanza, talking about their work on this groundbreaking film. This will take place in Toronto on July 6th, starting at 6 p.m. at Hot Docs Theatre. Go to the link in the description for this episode and use the code VFF Tonebenders to claim your free seats as well as entrance to the post-screening party where there will be complimentary bites and refreshments. I hope to see you there. Christina, in the last episode of Love Story is the plane crash that we all know is coming while we're watching the entire series. It's totally different than any plane crash that's ever been on television before, because like people are whispering while we're leading up to the plane crash. Like the plane is rattling and shaking, and they're almost calm, and like it's a really emotional scene. And obviously we don't get to see the actual crash, but we feel it through the emotions of the next multiple scenes of people getting the phone call. Do you want to talk about how you mix that scene? Because it must have been difficult. There's a million ways you could go with it.
Yeah, definitely. I can't talk about this scene without giving a shout out to my mixing partner, Joe Doherty, who handled the dialogue and music side of the mixing of the show. And I mixed the sound effects, background, and Foley for the series. And I think to get into a little bit sort of about like the tone of the show, when we introduced both characters the first episode, I really wanted to make sure that Carolyn's version of the world that she was living in, the New York City that was her perspective, sounded different from John's New York City. I believe Carolyn lived in Greenwich and also Lower East Side. So a lot of times like in her apartment, I really wanted the background of the outside of the streets to be pretty audible, so you can feel that she's living in an open street that's much busier. You feel anybody, and I'm talking to 2 mixers here that are living in New York City. I spent a lot of time in New York City about 9 years ago as well. So I just very much remember the feeling of that city. When you're there, you're constantly hearing the streets happening, traffic's going on. Versus when we're cutting to John's apartment in Tribeca, his loft is much higher off ground. It's not front street facing, so it's a lot more quieter. Even when we're in Jackie's home, you can just hear their very subtle details and like how the background is a lot less busy and it's more like in the house sound. And I would say throughout the first few episodes, the background is actually much hotter in the mix than after they got married and got together. So then when the two characters meet and fall in love, then it's like now we have the New York City and the world of John and Carolyn, and with her going through with just being chased down and being aggravated by paparazzi, just how intense that felt as well. It's almost like her love for the city, like the feeling of her world almost gradually fade away. And now it's just very assaulting paparazzi and not having privacy, which create, hopefully the sound effects really help contribute a little bit to the anxiety feeling and really put you in a women's shoe in that time era that was on the front page of the magazine and what that feeling was like. So we really talk about it. And then I remember the first episode, also my mixing partner, Joe Doherty, came up with when the two characters went to the Calvin Klein party in the very first episode, but at the time they don't know each other yet. They're about to be introduced. Just anytime when we're cutting in between John and Carolyn, going back and forth, every time we're with John, we made the crowd, the group, and the paparazzi surrounding him much bigger. Whereas every time we cut to her, it was a lot more quiet and private, just like shows her lifestyle and her working, just her personality, I think, and her, at the time, she still had her own autonomy and how she weaved in and out of parties, to really create that difference. So then when by the time they get together, it made it feel like she has lost that autonomy by the time she became publicly known. So when it got to the last episode, approaching the plane crash, for the entire series, like also if you've listened to the soundtracks, they had like great 90s hits. So I think my job on the show is definitely to support the storytelling and to absolutely support the dialogue and the music mixing. When it gets to the plane crash scene, we set it up so that in the beginning, I was delivered material by my wonderful sound supervisor, Gary McGregor, and sound designer, John Snyder. They gave me the exactly accurate plane sound for the aircraft that John was flying, which is a single engine, they're all metal plane. So in the beginning of the aircraft, you can hear more of the plane sound as they take off. And the reason that the reason for the plane crash essentially was because he didn't acquire his instrument rating, and flying without instrument at night is very dangerous and you can experience spatial disorientation. So as we are witnessing him experiencing and starting to experience that disorientation, we can hear the metal shaking of the plane gradually building up. You can hear him making sudden changing directions on the aircraft. You can hear the engine sound. So the audience at that point would know something is happening, like something or is set up to be happening. But at the most tense moment of the plane crash, I would say, we wanted the story to really be about John and Carolyn's love story. Like it's not about the plane crash. So I pretty much built my plane all the way up to this intensity point where Joe and I had a handoff. Then I just filter out the high frequency of the plane engine and pretty much hide the low end frequency of the plane engine to transition into music. So the music is taking us to the absolutely high end of the moment. And at that time, we're really just focusing, I think it's the sadness of like a lovely couple and their love story instead of focusing on this scary plane crash. And then at the end, also when the music take out, there's a very hint of subtle of the plane landing into the water sound that's completely reverb and designed out. So then it's just blending out with the music to transition us into the next scene when we're starting to see their families getting calls about them not being MIA.
It's a really effective scene that like it's I don't want to be insulting and say when I say it's simple, I don't mean that as a bad way at all. It's super affecting because of how everything gets pulled back and we just hear her whispering. I can't remember exactly what she says, something along the lines of just breathe and trust yourself or something like that. And like you can't help but have an emotional reaction to it. It was really impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Vinny, let's talk about Dexter for a second. First of all, going through your IMDb page, Vinny, it makes you wonder if you've ever slept because you have so many credits. It's insane. And a lot of them are for ADR recording as well as re-recording mixing. And I was wondering if maybe you could talk about, maybe recording stuff for ADR that you're going to end up mixing, or figuring out, flagging issues for ADR on if you can fix it or not, kind of thing, knowing that you're going to be the one that's holding the bag at the end of the process.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. I mean, yeah, I've just been, we've been really lucky here to just have a nice handful of projects that keep coming back and come through over the years. So it's, keeping everyone here at the studio busy, and again, just super lucky and thankful for that. In terms of ADR, recording, mixing, supervision, a lot of the times we'll kind of get a creative wish list from the editorial department. We'll go through the production sound rolls and start doing an edit and then come up with our own technical list. And while we're going through the production sound rolls, we may try to do some cleanup here and there, or like swap in alts. And if we do swap in any alts, of course, we'll send them to, the powers that be and be like, hey, does this work? Is this okay? We're swapping this line slightly and moving it around. And if they say it works, then we'll, try to basically knock off as much as we can technically so that the actors aren't bombarded with, 40 sheets of ADR cues. Part of it is also we've been really lucky enough. Emily is going into season 6, and Dexter, we're going into season 2, and we were also able to do Dexter Original Sin before we did Resurrection. So we have that rapport with the producers and the editors and the team. So we kind of get a sense for what they're looking for and what they're flagging, and the stuff that they're like, we don't need that. We can push this scene and make it more about the music and the sound effects than their breathing or the lines. So that's kind of one of the ways that we've been able to go back and forth and really hone in on what we need in terms of ADR, so the actors aren't bombarded, and then what we need to kind of push the story along and make sure the dialogue is sounding crisp and clean and all that. One of the things that, especially in Dexter, you get all these kind of fight scenes. So, we tend to get all those efforts, especially when he's doing the stabs and when the people are bleeding out and on the table. So that's usually, we got to get those. But then sometimes we also use production because it's like, hey, it sounds clean. It's the actual performance, and it's a little dirty, but we kind of like the dirt. So we'll keep it.
For Dexter and Emily in Paris, is it a 1-person mix crew or a 2-person mix crew?
Usually, Lou Goldstein and myself will kind of bounce back and forth between supervising and mixing. So it just kind of depends on scheduling. And I mean, we'll both touch the episodes at some point, but, maybe he'll touch it first and then I'll do a second pass, and then maybe I'll do a first pass and he does a second one. And we'll usually do our own mix passes. Then we'll go through a mix pass with the producers and the editors. And then we'll do a final mix pass with, kind of the directors, the showrunners, everybody. And, it's a big Zoom, and it's a big full room full of people, and it's a party.
So you have your fingers on the faders for dialogue, music, and sound effects at some point on every episode.
Yeah, I mean, we pretty much will do it all. It's not necessarily a 2-man mix, doing it at the same time, but it's really just like, here's my pass. I'm going to, and one of the things that may happen is I could be mixing an episode of Dexter and he's mixing an episode of Emily, and then we'll go back and forth and he's like, all right, here's my first pass of this episode. And then, kind of swap rooms at that point. So we're lucky enough to be able to have the space and kind of the capacity, and we've developed a workflow over the years to be able to do that sort of thing, to kind of keep everything moving as quickly as possible so that, the timeline is not pushed back for the clients.
Wow, that's a really unique way of doing things. I don't think I've ever encountered that before. That's really cool.
So, Vinny, when you go between the two of those, since like you were saying earlier, Tim, with it being two completely different genres, do you find that you need like a beat to get your head out of like the one space and into the other space that's completely different? Like, how does that work for you?
It might be a long coffee break. Emily is one of those shows where, some of the larger music moments, we go back and forth of like, should this play like a film or TV show, or should it be like a music video? And then Dexter, just completely opposite, where you have everything is very immersive and kind of in your face. So it's fun to just go back and forth between those two worlds and see like what's going to work here and then what's not going to, be the game plan for this show. So.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Hollis, you're a one-person mix crew, correct, on Noah Khan?
I am on most projects. Unless I have something that overlaps, then I'll outsource some of the dialogue editing. Say there's overlapping, if it's a condensed schedule, which pretty much everything I have is a condensed schedule. It feels like just a panic attack every time. But yeah, for the most part, it's always me. And I don't like to let other people do stuff. So I will say I'd rather lose sleep than lose money. So, that's, and I like having my stamp all over everything. So yeah, there's a huge ego there too that I don't normally, it's there in the work. I don't try and have it in everyday life, but yes, that's such a long answer to just say yes. Sorry.
No problem. I loved it. That was great. Let's maybe, we're running out of time soon. So maybe let's go around the horn and maybe talk about your favorite sound scene for the projects that we've been talking about. You can say whatever you want, Andy and Ethan, but the opening scene of episode 1, the huge long tracking shot, that must have been really fun to work on. But if that's not the one that comes to your head, let me know what is.
The approach was early on in that to start off, let the music kind of carry us in, and Chris and Michael had a great kind of film projector sound in their score, kind of to what Hollis was talking about, where you nowadays, like, there is a lot of mixing between sound design and music, and it was really a great beginner to then where we want that superhero sound carrying us through. And then we kind of see him climbing up the wall, and we get the black and white kind of old footage of kids playing in the park. And we're getting that old sound and that old recording, to, climaxing where he loses Ruby. And we definitely want to make sure those thunder cracks were like that old Foley kind of flapping thunder from the 30s. But also not, again, cheesy, because it's an emotional moment. So that was where you kind of would have to enhance some of those old sounds just ever so slightly. So that was a lot of fun to work on. And in in that respect, for me, it's always been the Spidey sense, because throughout the entire series, it changes every time. And the idea behind the Spidey sense is that it's not just, his universe and his world, but it is the multiverse that we're now becoming more familiar with within Spider-Man. And he gets bitten at some point, as they all do, to become the spider. And when we learn that, there's a yell that he has, and I wanted to make sure that we incorporated that into the early Spidey senses that we had, where it's like a subliminal storytelling that the audience will eventually find out in the series where things are coming, but you wouldn't know unless you kind of really rewatched. And Oren had really latched onto that, in the producers, where we wanted to tell every spider sense with either something that's about to happen, something that's currently happening, or previously happened that led us to this point. And in particular, the very first one that we hear is kind of like reawakening his Spidey sense. So we're very noir, very kind of almost mono with the mix, and very 1930s kind of dirty almost sounding. And when that Spider Sense kicks in, I'd approached the whole sound team of Ryan Collins and Will Digby and Caitlin, to kind of come together and come up with an idea of how do we take him in, how do we carry him through, and then what takes us out. And big part from Oren was that spiders don't have ears. Like, they don't listen like we would listen. They listen through vibrations in their legs. So a big part was, all right, well, we have to make this feel like the multiverse web is moving and getting his attention and bringing him in. And so Will did a great job of some layers on that, and I had some kind of tight elements I wanted to put in there. But Ryan Collins had come up with this great idea to just kind of hone us in the very beginning with this little like high frequency that everything else in the mix goes away, and then we open up into Atmos with the web vibrations. And then Ethan had put in a great sound of the dialogue that's actually happening during that moment that he's walking up to, we kind of start to hear that. And it was something that was basically thrown away, on the cutting room floor, so to speak. And to bring it back and bring it in there was that perfect element to tie it. Whereas, like, the next time we hear it in 102, or another time we hear it later in that episode, I'm sorry, Dan Shearer, our producer, had an idea of wanting to make sure we're here. Dream a Little Dream, the song that we're going to be seeing soon from our femme fatale, that he, how do we fit it in this super tiny amount of time? So working with the music department, got them to give me part of the song and her singing, and just finding that right point that kind of carries us with the web vibration, with the scream out, with the hone in. So it's very Spider Sense in every episode was a lot of fun to work on, as the whole group really contributed greatly, and I felt really proud of what we all did. But Ethan, you have, I'm sure, other thoughts too.
I've watched episode 1 probably 10 times in the last 2 weeks. We spent a lot of time crafting not just the opening, but the opening into the main title, into the bar, which is really the first part of the story. And the going from a full theatrical Atmos immersive mix on the opening with music and effects and everything else, and saying this is a superhero show. And as we come out of the main titles, introducing this very mono, very sort of, it's not low fidelity, but we rolled off a lot of the frequencies, and it's got kind of that 40s canned effects. And, we shot the loop group actually for the whole series, but in that scene, we actually used a noirish style loop group so that everybody's got a little bit more character, a little bit more like kind of that Edward G. Robinson sort of vocal style. And that's the scene where we got to say, no, this is a noir story. Like, yes, it's a superhero story, and we're going to get there, but like, we're going to start here where this is an old school detective story. And we were able to be extremely selective when he comes out of the bar and goes out into the street. It's, the old car goes by, and you have the very clicky footsteps, like the high fashion dress shoes that everybody wore back then, with the Foley that's very tap, 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 tap. And as the show goes on, and as we get more into a superhero show, we're able to sort of expand everything into that. But that opening, I think, those 3 sequences from the prologue through the main title, which I love and I watch in every episode, and then into that opening bar and first scene, we really made a point of saying this is a detective story first and foremost. This is how what the vibe is going to be throughout. And I think that was really important that we nailed that part.
Christina, do you have a favorite scene from Love Story?
I do. I think it was like the most fun to mix as well. The beginning of the episode 4, we opened up with a Madonna song. At the time, John and Carolyn has just gotten together, but they haven't made it public, so they're trying to hide their relationship. And again, they're going to the same party, and we're just weaving in and out of this Madonna song with the crowd sound versus then dropping the crowd for the little details. So when they secretly pass each other things at the party, there were just a lot of weaving in of the sound effects and the music in that scene. And it's really fun, and it feels very romantic. And who doesn't like Madonna? So.
That is a really affecting scene, and it must have been really difficult with the huge crowd and music sounds to get all those delicate sounds in there as well. It would have been really tricky.
Yeah, it was multiple. A lot of passes of me and my mixing partner Joe were just on the console together, pulling up and down, like pass and pass to get it to just the right point. Yeah.
Hollis?
I would say, so I might be confusing a couple of things because there were a couple of different cuts of the film. One that I worked on for a really long time, and then we had to reconform it. But I believe it would be the whole Fenway Park scene, because for him, Noah Kahn being from New England, Fenway Park is like the venue, and to be able to be on the grass, in front of the Green Monster and all of that stuff was a big deal. And I think that he was more nervous about that than Madison Square Garden or anything like that. And so there's this whole montage. I mean, it's like a multi-part scene, but there's a whole montage where it's the lead up to Fenway, and he's doing all his prep, and he's like, and he's not talking. He's saving his voice, and he's writing everything down. The music's really kind of tense and stuff. And then he's doing his vocal exercises, and then it's the performance. And there's a few songs, so that is itself, but it's when Fenway Park ends. And there's a lot of moments like this where it goes from really big to really small. And I think that's a theme of the film anyway, because that's his life. He wasn't expecting to be on this huge, he was happy to play pubs and like small clubs, and suddenly he's selling out stadiums. But at the end of Fenway Park, which was the most important and the last concert performance for that tour, everybody, he's in the car, and you hear sirens that are escorting him out, and he's just like, holy crap, and blah blah blah, there's fireworks going off, and you hear people going, Noah, 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 and then it's like he's in Vermont, it's the next day, he's at his mom's house, and there's like crickets and birds, and it's like, what do I do now? So it like this whole huge ramp suddenly, which is probably like what Olympians feel like after the Olympics are over. It's just suddenly, it's all been energy up to here, and what do I do? And it's just the disparity between that and then the small life again. That got me every time, because it's like you feel what he's feeling, and it's like exhaustion and then fear, but also at home again. So it's weird. But all of those conflicting emotions is what made that work for me. So
it's a very funny contrast of him on stage in front of like 65,000 people going nuts, to the next morning his mom throwing him a pair of boots and going, we got to put the dock in the lake.
Yeah.
Go lift it up.
Oh yeah. And the dog ate
around here, buddy.
The dog ate the oar, by the way, so you don't have a paddle. Yeah.
That and the scene where he sings to the I don't know if it's technically Make-A-Wish kid, but the little girl, when he sings that song to her and she's just crying in front of him. Oh,
Zuzu. Yeah.
Vinny, pick, I guess, one of your two shows and let us know what your favorite sound scene was for it.
For Dexter in season 7, I'm sorry, not season 7, in episode 7 in Resurrection, season 1, there's a scene where, the serial killers are taken to Prater's mansion, and Dexter is getting ready to figure out a way to kill the second Gemini killer, and he just kind of pulls him close, and they have a really intimate conversation on a bench. And the performances from both actors in that scene are incredible. And eventually, Dexter gets to the point of the conversation, which is like, did you feel, twins can feel each other's like, presence and energy? And he's like, did you feel like your brother died last night? And then he proceeds to stab him, in the neck with a piece of glass. And it's just a really, it's such an intimate scene, but it's just also so like heavy, and there's like blood gushing and, kind of everything you want in like a one-on-one combat fight scene. So I'm going to say a favorite scene from Dexter. That would be it for that season 1.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. Listeners can check out all these titles we've been speaking about on their various streaming platforms. Noah Kahan, Out of Body, and Emily in Paris are on Netflix, Spider Noirs on Amazon Prime, Love Story Disney Plus, and Dexter Resurrection on Paramount Plus. Vinny, Ethan, Christina, Andy, Hollis, thanks so much for taking the time to share your knowledge and your stories and experiences today working on these wonderful projects. I look forward to getting a chance to speak with you all again, because you're all really well-spoken, articulate, and you've had some really creative answers for me. So thank you very much. I also want to thank Impact 24 PR for putting this panel together, and to everyone watching at home. We'll see you all next time. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Sound Ideas works with partners across the creative industries to distribute professional sound libraries, and they're always looking to grow their collection. If you've created your own sound effects library or are currently developing one, Sound Ideas is interested in acquiring high-quality collections from creators, whether it's a focused collection or a wide-ranging release. They offer a trusted platform with global distribution, professional licensing, metadata support, and a team that understands the craft. If you have a sound effects library and are interested in selling it, Sound Ideas would like to hear from you. To get more information, please reach out via email to support@sound-ideas.com. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support.